The loudest person in the room is usually the weakest. Real power does not rush to defend itself. It watches, calculates, and lets arrogance expose itself in front of witnesses. The moment someone talks down to you, they are gambling that you will react emotionally, which means, Chapter 1, the refusal to perform. When someone talks down to you in public, they are not just insulting you. They are recruiting an audience. Their real target is not your feelings, it is your status. They want to force you into a primitive role, the defensive child, the flustered subordinate, the person who explains too much. Most people lose the moment they begin defending themselves. Why? Because defense accepts the frame. If a man says, "Do you always have to be this slow?" and you answer, "I am not slow, I was just trying to make sure it was correct," you have already stepped inside his courtroom. He is the judge, you are the accused. The first silent way to dismantle that person is brutally simple. Do not perform. Do not rush. Do not explain. Do not feed the spectacle. This is not passivity, it is strategic non-compliance. Think about the Roman Senate. The most feared men were rarely the ones shouting first. The terrifying ones were the men who let an opponent speak too much, reveal too much, and then answered with a sentence so measured it felt like a death order. Public power has always belonged to the person who controls tempo. Here's how this works in real life. Scenario 1, an office meeting. A colleague smirks and says, "I guess we are all waiting for you to catch up." Everyone looks at you. The amateur reacts fast. The professional lifts their eyes slowly, holds eye contact for one beat too long, and says, "Continue." That single word does three things. First, it refuses the invitation to self-defend. Second, it places pressure back on the aggressor to fill the silence. Third, it signals to the room that you are not emotionally moved, and public humiliation only works if the target visibly absorbs it. Scenario 2, a family dinner. A relative says, "You always were the sensitive one." That line is bait disguised as history. It tries to force you into an old identity in front of witnesses. Instead of arguing with the label, you let the sentence die in the air. You take a sip of water. You turn to someone else and ask, "What were you saying?" That move is psychologically lethal. You have denied them the emotional payoff. More importantly, you have treated their attempt at dominance as socially irrelevant. People who talk down to others in public usually rely on one hidden engine: audience energy. They need reactions the way fire needs oxygen. Starve the reaction, and the flame has to burn its own source. This is why some of the most devastating social operators use stillness. They understand that composure in a tense moment is interpreted by groups as rank. Humans are tribal. We scan for who appears most in control. The person who remains calm is often assumed to be the one with options, authority, and inner certainty. Look at your own life. How many times did someone gain power over you not because they were stronger, smarter, or superior, but because they were willing to be shameless while you were busy being polite? That is the game. They spend recklessly. You preserve dignity. The answer is not to become loud. The answer is to become immovable. Step by step, here is the tactic. Step 1. Stop your face from reacting instantly. No nervous smile, no eyebrow spike, no wounded expression. Step 2. Slow your breathing. One calm inhale through the nose prevents the impulsive verbal spill. Step 3. Hold eye contact briefly, then detach. This shows you registered the attack, but did not submit to it. Step 4. Either say almost nothing or redirect the room. Step 5. Let them sit inside the awkwardness they created. That final step matters more than people realize. Silence after disrespect is not emptiness. It is a mirror. And many arrogant people cannot survive what they look like when their own behavior is reflected back by a room that suddenly feels uncomfortable. The goal is not to win by out-insulting them. The goal is to make their attempt fail visibly. Once people sense that a put-down has not landed, they begin noticing the aggressor instead of the target. Suddenly he sounds insecure. Suddenly she sounds performative. Suddenly the social gravity shifts. And that is the first collapse. They expected your reaction. Instead, they met your refusal. Chapter 2, the precision question. The second tactic is colder, more surgical. If someone talks down to you publicly, ask them to clarify exactly what they mean. Not emotionally, not sarcastically, clinically. This method works because contempt depends on vagueness. Vague insults are social smoke bombs. They create a mood of superiority without requiring the speaker to stand behind an exact statement. The moment you ask for precision, the attack has to become concrete, and concrete statements can be examined, challenged, or exposed as stupid. Consider a classic example from legal cross-examination. Skilled attorneys do not fight emotional hostility with emotional hostility. They narrow language, they force definitions, they make swagger walk into evidence. Once that happens, confidence often drains from the witness because performance has become accountability. Imagine a manager says in front of the team, "Your judgment is clearly not where it needs to be." Most people would apologize, justify, or shrink. The darker move is this: which specific decision are you referring to? Notice the elegance. You are not objecting, you are not pleading, you are inviting detail. If they answer vaguely again, you continue. Be specific. What part was poor judgment? What outcome are you measuring that by? Each question removes theater and replaces it with structure. And structure is deadly to bullies, because many public put-downs are built on implication, not substance. They rely on emotional momentum. Precision breaks momentum. There's historical precedent for this. Socrates dismantled men more powerful than himself, not by roaring over them, but by asking small, unbearable questions. He let vanity build its own trap, publicly, calmly, repeatedly. Men who entered the exchange feeling superior often left exposed by their own inability to define what they had confidently asserted. This is not mere debate technique, it is status reversal. When a person talks down to you and you respond with exact questions, the roles begin to invert. They wanted you disorganized and reactive. Now they are the one under examination. They wanted the room to see your weakness. Now the room is watching whether they can support their own claim. Here is the deeper psychology. Human confidence is strongest when operating in broad emotional narratives. You are difficult. You are not leader material. You always make things harder. These are not arguments. These are dominance clouds. They feel heavy until light touches them. Then comes the collapse. Scenario 1. Social gathering. Someone says, "You really do love hearing yourself talk, don't you?" The average response is defensive denial. The superior response is, "Compared to who in this conversation?" That question is devastating because it sounds simple, but it demands comparison. If they name others, they risk implicating the group. If they name only you, they need evidence. If they laugh it off, the room feels the dodge. Scenario 2. Workplace presentation. A senior colleague says, "This is pretty amateur." You reply, "Which part is amateur? The analysis, the format, or the recommendation?" Now watch what happens. If they cannot answer clearly, their authority leaks. If they answer weakly, you can isolate it. If they over-explain, they begin sounding defensive in response to your calmness. Think about your own life again. How often have you let people get away with broad, identity-level attacks because challenging them felt rude? That social hesitation is exactly what gives manipulators room to operate. They do not need to be right. They only need you to feel pressure. To use this tactic properly, follow a sequence. First, strip all anger from your voice. Second, ask one narrow question. Third, wait. Do not rescue them from their own vagueness. Fourth, if they dodge, ask for clarification again. Fifth, stop after 2 or 3 questions. Overdoing it turns power into performance. The beauty of this method is that it preserves your image while destabilizing theirs. You appear rational, they appear slippery. You appear controlled, they appear irritated. And irritation in public often reads as weakness when it is provoked by someone calmer. One warning: never ask questions you already know they can answer perfectly unless you are prepared for that answer. Precision is a blade. It can cut both ways. The point is not random interrogation. The point is to expose contempt that lacks substance. When done well, the aggressor experiences something deeply uncomfortable: the sudden realization that the room is no longer automatically on their side. Their social leverage shrinks, their certainty wavers. Their confidence, which was inflated by your assumed compliance, starts thinning in real time. Chapter 3. The Status Mirror. The third tactic is to mirror their behavior back indirectly without matching their aggression. This is one of the most sophisticated ways to make confidence collapse, because it weaponizes self-awareness against people who depend on social blindness. Many domineering personalities say degrading things publicly because they assume no one will name the behavior itself. They assume the conversation will stay trapped at the content level. They insult you, you defend the content, they remain free. The mirror changes that. Instead of debating what they said, you expose what they are doing. This can sound like, interesting tone, or that was unnecessarily dismissive, or you seem very committed to saying that publicly. These lines are not insults. They are behavioral mirrors. And once behavior is named, the crowd begins evaluating not your worth, but their conduct. This is where public predators often become unstable. Their power depended on invisibility. They wanted to dominate while appearing normal. The mirror strips that camouflage. Machiavelli understood something brutal about public image. People can tolerate cruelty more easily than they can tolerate looking foolish. When you mirror someone's social behavior, you threaten their image of sophistication, control, and legitimacy. Example 1. A friend in a group says, "Wow, you finally said something useful." If you say that is rude, you sound hurt. If you say you like doing that in front of people, you have moved from emotion to pattern. You are no longer pleading for respect, you are documenting a habit. Example 2. During a meeting, someone says, "Let us hear from someone who actually understands this." Instead of counterattacking, you reply, "You are making status plays instead of arguments." That line is dangerous. Why? Because it forces everyone listening to reclassify the event. It is no longer a spontaneous remark. It is now a power move. And once a power move is recognized as a power move, it loses innocence. Look at the people around you. The ones who quietly control rooms are not always the most intelligent. Often they are simply the first to identify the game being played. Most people remain trapped inside the game. They react to the blow. The higher level operator names the strategy. This is exactly why the mirror is so powerful. It moves you above the exchange. There is a chilling principle in psychology. Behavior changes when self-observation increases. People become awkward when they suddenly feel seen at the level of motive rather than words. The bully can handle disagreement. What they struggle with is being calmly observed. Use this in 3 moves. Move 1. Identify the behavioral pattern in 1 sentence. Move 2. Keep your tone neutral, almost bored. Move 3. Stop talking. Do not over-explain the diagnosis. Over-explaining weakens it. A mirror should be brief, clean, and difficult to argue with. For example, "You are trying to embarrass me. That was performative. You keep framing things to sound superior." Each of these lines forces a split in the aggressor's mind. They now have 2 problems: the original attack and the exposure of the attack. If they deny it too strongly, they confirm sensitivity. If they joke, they seem evasive. If they double down, they look intentional. And in public, intentional cruelty is hard to wear elegantly. This is especially effective against polished manipulators, the kind who smile while degrading you. They survive because others confuse polish with character. The mirror peels that apart. It says, in effect, "I see the mechanism, not the costume." Once that happens, confidence often does not explode, it curdles. Their rhythm breaks, their face tightens, their next line arrives half a second too late. That half second tells the room everything. Chapter 4. Controlled Agreement. Now we enter a darker level of strategy. The 4th tactic is controlled agreement. This sounds counterintuitive, but under the right conditions it is devastating. When someone tries to diminish you publicly, they expect resistance. Their nervous system is already prepared to push against your denial. If instead you agree selectively, they lose traction. Suppose someone says, "You are clearly not the most charismatic person here." A weak response denies. A stronger response says, "Probably not." That is it. No wound, no explanation, no collapse. Why does this work? Because insults often derive force from contrast. The aggressor says something negative, you reject it, tension rises, the crowd watches. But if you absorb the statement without distress, the insult loses voltage. You have demonstrated that your self-concept is not dependent on the attacker's framing. This resembles certain principles in martial arts. Force redirected is more efficient than force opposed. The public aggressor lunges for your ego. You remove the ego from the path. Consider Abraham Lincoln, who was repeatedly mocked for his appearance. At times, he neutralized attacks by conceding a point before the insult could land. This did not make him weak. It made him difficult to corner. A man comfortable with imperfection is hard to humiliate. There is also a sinister secondary effect. Controlled agreement often makes the aggressor look petty. If they say, "You are not exactly impressive," and you answer, "Depends on the category," with calm indifference, they seem more invested in tearing you down than you are in preserving image. That asymmetry is socially expensive for them. Scenario 1. Someone says, "You always overthink everything." You reply, "Often." Then you move on. Scenario 2. You are not really built for high-pressure situations. You answer, "I am selective with pressure." Notice the pattern. You do not swallow their frame whole. You agree on your terms. You bend the statement slightly, enough to show ownership, not submission. This must be done carefully. If the accusation is serious and false, do not agree to something damaging. Controlled agreement is for ego attacks, image attacks, and condescending jabs, not for allegations that could harm your reputation materially. The step-by-step method is simple. Step 1. Isolate the harmless or subjective part of their insult. Step 2. Agree with that part without emotion. Step 3. Add a subtle reframing if needed. Step 4. Exit the moment. The exit matters. If you keep talking, you give the moment new oxygen. The psychological outcome is profound. The aggressor was trying to define your identity from above. Your calm agreement signals that your identity is self-authored. That is deeply frustrating to anyone who gains pleasure from provoking insecurity. And here is the uncomfortable truth. People who publicly belittle others are often hunting for proof that they still matter. If they cannot make you defend your worth, they are left alone with their own need to dominate. That is not your burden. That is their exposure. Chapter 5. The Final Reversal. The fifth tactic is the most advanced because it combines silence, framing, and social intelligence into one devastating maneuver. Elevate the room above the attacker. A person who talks down to you in public is trying to lower the standard of the interaction to a place where they feel powerful. You win not by crawling into that arena, but by making the room feel bigger than their behavior. This can take many forms. A simple version, "We can keep this constructive." Another, "If there is a real point in there, say it directly." And the coldest version, "This is getting less impressive the longer it goes on." That last line should be used rarely because it is devastating. It does not call them cruel, it calls them unimpressive. To many status-driven personalities, that is worse. Why is this the final reversal? Because it shifts the social ceiling. The aggressor wanted a gladiator pit. You turned on the lights and revealed a childish performance. The room now has a reference point higher than conflict: standard, maturity, discipline, relevance. In elite institutions, from military command to high-level diplomacy, the person who can restore order without visible emotional spillage is often perceived as the true authority. Not because they are morally pure, but because they regulate the environment. Humans trust regulators of tension. Picture a public dinner, a boardroom, a friend group, a wedding table. One person makes a cutting remark at your expense. Instead of fighting back, you say, "If we are doing cheap shots now, this is going to get boring fast." Everything changes. You have not just defended yourself, you have recruited the audience's higher taste. No one wants to be trapped in a low-grade spectacle once someone names it as low-grade. This is the principle tyrants fear most: reframing the crowd. History is full of powerful figures who lost control the moment their behavior stopped looking strong and started looking small. Public confidence is fragile because it is not internal. It is rented from the perception of others. Change the perception, and the throne starts shaking. Use this method in a disciplined sequence. 1. Stay physically relaxed. 2. Speak fewer words than they expect. 3. Frame their behavior as beneath the moment. 4. Return to substance or withdraw your attention. 5. Let the room do the rest. Because once the audience senses that the aggressor is lowering the standard, they begin distancing themselves psychologically. That distance is where confidence collapses. Not with a dramatic explosion, but with a subtle social abandonment. And that is the deepest lesson in this entire video. Public disrespect is rarely defeated by emotional force. It is defeated by controlling the meaning of the moment. The one who defines what is happening usually defines who rises and who shrinks. So remember the 7 silent ways inside these 5 chapters. Refuse to perform, slow the tempo, force precision, expose the behavior, mirror the motive, agree without surrender, and raise the standard of the room. These are not tricks for petty revenge. They are tools for surviving status warfare without losing dignity. The next time someone tries to talk down to you in front of others, do not rush to prove yourself. Let them reveal themselves. Then choose the method that makes their own arrogance turn inward. That is when confidence collapses on the spot. Not because you shouted louder, but because you remained harder to control than they expected. Power does not belong to the person who speaks first. It belongs to the person who understands the frame, controls the tempo, and refuses to be psychologically recruited into someone else's performance. If you want to go deeper, buy the book first, then study the recommended reading, and start practicing these responses before you need them under pressure. To master these tactics in real life, get the Silent Observer's Playbook. Or check out the recommended reading in the description below. Like and subscribe for more.